Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Okay, hello everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to invite you to go with me on a journey for the next half an hour. It's about an audio journey from a European perspective. And I'm Christoph. I'm the managing director of Axel Springer Audio. And I'm your tour guide for the next couple of minutes. So since we are talking about a journey, let's start at the very beginning. More precisely, the 16th week of pregnancy. At that time, the fetus is already able to listen. And funny side fact, as soon as he listened to music from the outside, he stuck out his tongue. In this study, to be exact, it was a flute sonata from Bach. What does it mean? Audio is deeply rooted in our DNA, and more or less every journey of life starts with audio. So that brings up the next more general question, who the hell is Axel Springer? We are pretty well known in Europe, but probably not in Asia. So therefore, in a nutshell, Axel Springer is a media and technology company. We are active in more than 40 different countries, and we have two main pillars. On the one hand side, we have a couple of news media brands like Bild, which is a quite popular German tabloid newspaper, other digital platforms, we have TV stations, or maybe you know, Insider in the US or Politico, we recently acquired the brand. And on the other side, we have classifieds media, so a couple of job portals, real estate portals. And overall, on a worldwide basis, we address more than 400 million unique users every month. So the question is, why a publisher like us is doubling down on audio? And from a publisher's perspective, there are three major reasons to do so. It sounds like a rush, but listening is easier than reading. And the impact of journalism is huge. Not only that you are able to consume audio everywhere, users also choose audio if they can. To give you one example, from Denmark, there's a company called Zetland, and they started a print-based newspaper, not a text-based newspaper, a newsletter, and they introduced an audio option a couple of months later. And out of the sudden, they have 70% of their usage is driven by audio. The second major reason is the loyalty of the listener is insane. We also see that in our digital platforms. We have higher time spans, we have better retention rates, so a lot of positive secondary effects if you compare audio users on our platforms to pure digital users. And the third reason is pretty good news for all advertisers, because everybody wants to have the young and urban ones, and especially when we are talking about podcasting, here they are, right? And what we have done in the audio space so far is that we were radio investors since the very beginning of private radio in Germany in the 1990s. And we have a bunch of market-leading radio stations in Germany. And to make this clear, radio in Germany and also in Europe is, if you have market-leading stations, still a quite successful business with really nice margins. I have to underline that at this point here. But nevertheless, from our point of view, radio struggles when it comes to digital transformation. And so, therefore, we decided 7 years ago that we have to add on online audio investments to our portfolio. So we started in 2015 with Loud FM, which is a user-generated web radio platform with over 10,000 stations. It's quite popular in Germany. And then 2 years later, for example, we also acquired a minor stake in Art19, which is a podcast company that was recently sold to Amazon. But our major reason to do that was to expand our network in the US. It was extremely helpful to be an audio investor if you talk to US colleagues. And at the same year, we also started our first taps in podcasting, within our news media brands, but it was mainly passion-driven, not really business-driven at that point. And then 2 years later, the next big step was that we acquired a quite substantial share in Media Pioneer, which that's a company. They are producing a digital newsletter on a daily basis, political digital newsletter, and they are producing also a couple of different podcasts, including the #1 daily news deep dive podcast in Germany. And the most astonishing thing is that they are fully focused on paid and also paid audio. And you might say, well, I'm not sure that could work. But just to give you a glimpse, so we are way above 10,000 subscribers a month with a quite high price point of almost 20 euros, because we compare us to the usual classical newspaper prices. And so therefore it's doing pretty well. And let's say, driven by the success of the online audio investments, we decided, okay, now it's time that audio must become part of our journalistic DNA. Audio should be part of our core business. So we decided in 2021 to establish a task force. That's typically in a corporate environment, that's in most cases, that's the first thing you do. And we have thought a lot about smart strategies. And the major task was also to convince the whole organization. You've seen that on the chart before, 16,000 employees. So I call these days the PowerPoint wars. So we've done tremendous amount of charts and presentation. But it quickly became clear that it's totally necessary to have additional storytellers and audio producers within the organization. So we have done another investment in a company called WakeWord, which is one of the leading podcast production studios in Germany, with special expertise when it comes to storytelling, but also with a broad technology expertise. And last year, finally, we established the centralized business unit. And while doing that, we also introduced TTS to our major German digital platforms. And we decided, by the way, to do an own development on that. So the reason for that is, on the one hand side, we definitely want to have a dedicated brand voice for each brand, because at the end of the day, Alexa is the brand voice of Amazon and nothing else. And secondly, we figured out that if we develop our own algorithm and train the algorithm only with the dedicated articles of the brands, the outcome is way better. So you're heavily invited to figure it out. Simply type build.de in your browser and then click on an article, push the play button, and the result is really amazing. I haven't expected that at the beginning, but it's really great. So, and then finally, the team audio, that is the business unit that is responsible for all the business parts in the German-speaking countries so far. But it's a matter close to my heart to underline that also our radio portfolio still have the largest audience of over 35 million listeners. So to compare this, Germany has 83 million inhabitants, so it's still a pretty great number, and radio is financing a lot of stuff what we're doing in the audio space right now. So the unit has two main tasks. On the one hand side, it's the portfolio management, of course, and on the other side, the podcast portfolio, which consists of over 50 different formats right now. And our main challenge is, of course, to outperform. So to give you an idea, we tripled our reach within the last 12 months. And we have to do so because we are here to win. Not here, but in the German-speaking markets. So, and I really like this bold, stressed goal. It definitely helps to focus on the real important project with a huge impact for the further growth. So that really helped to have this bold mission for everybody in the team is committed to that, pretty much. And I'm really thankful that I have the possibility to have this team. So the core team is we're the ones with the black frames here. And thank God we are not alone. So we joined forces with our sales team, and we decided to build up a dedicated audio sales team within the largest sales organization, because we figured out that it doesn't make sense to simply integrate audio in an existing sales structure, because the product is, from an advertising point of view, way too complicated if you compare that to, let's say, the display advertising or TV spots. And on the other hand, of course, we join forces with our editorial teams at Bild and Welt, and when it comes to storytelling, it's extremely helpful to have our colleagues of WakeWord on board. So altogether, we are about 20 people working 24/7 on audio. And if you include the whole WakeWord team, because WakeWord is also producing for all major audio platforms and a couple of other large publishers, we are close to 40 right now. And when it comes to audio, let's be honest, we are all more or less smartphone addicted, I would say. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but and this is important due to 3 reasons. First one is, with the rise of voice control, your mobile will stay in the pocket more and more often. And the consequence is that there will be tons of new audio content, because audio will be one of the major channels to get in contact to your customers from an advertising perspective. So I pretty much assume that audio will be one of the dominant mobile advertising channels in the future, which is great news. Secondly, for us, it's about building new habits. That's the end game here. So we are really try to get in your morning routine. Therefore, for example, we produce a couple of daily podcasts because it's totally crucial to get into there. And the third reason why this is important, especially if you compare radio to audio and podcasting, it's when it comes to content creation, it's a little bit of a different mindset. Radio in Germany is always, hey, try to get as much as you can and try to avoid to switch off. That's the basic mindset in Germany. But since the competition on a smartphone is just one click away, here it's different. It's please turn me on. So that's something completely different. And another reason why we're really doubling down on audio is the fact that you already know that spoken word is on the rise globally. These are US stats. It seems to be a small figure, but in fact, it's a 5x growth within the last 7 years. So it's the biggest gain Edison Research has ever measured, as far as I know. And of course, I mean, we are publishers by heart. It's all about storytelling. And let's be honest, if we are watching TV, talk shows, you see the same faces, talking about the same topics with the same sentences. It's pretty boring from my point of view. So therefore, really, podcast and audio is a fantastic way to tell stories, also to give experts a voice that should be heard, or to explain way more complicated things. Therefore, I really love this quote from Game of Thrones, so I'm also a fan. And podcasting, in general, I would say it's less than 20 years old, but especially in the last 5 years, there was really a significant uplift in terms of usage, even in Europe and, of course, in the US. So what we see in Germany is that the usage is slightly underdeveloped. This is a comparison of the monthly listenership across different countries. But we always see the other around. It's a potential of 2/3, which is untapped so far. And if you go a little bit deeper into the data, this is the case these are data for Germany, but it's also the case in UK and other markets in Europe. The major growth currently, when it comes to podcasting and audio, comes from the older demographics. And so why is that good news? On the one hand side, this is exactly the target group of our news media brands. And additionally, since Germany and Europe in general has a quite old population, in Germany, the target group 30 plus stands for 70% of the population. So there's a huge potential of new listeners right here. And of course, from a publisher's point of view, people love news across the world. But in particular in Europe, these are the 2 pies here on the right, you see that almost 40% of downloads is driven by news, while only 20-something% of the offerings are news offerings. So this is a disproportionate use, which means, okay, the people and the listener are really interested in news, which is also good for, in general, journalistic topics. And we have developed our own analytics system. Since 2 years, there will be a launch this autumn. And the interesting thing is we can now dig deeper into the details. For example, here, one example, we measured the listener engagement with the amount of podcasts, with the amount of monthly downloads. And you see, for example, that once again, news is a major main category, but also, for example, true crime. There are not so many active podcasts out there in Germany, but the listener engagement is tremendously high, pretty much the same with comedy. And also this analysis really helps to develop new content, to figure out where's the gap, where's the niche, because there are tons of podcasts out there. That's really helpful. So I talked a lot about audio, radio, and stuff, but the question was, okay, how do we tackle the market? And we were heavily inspired by Schibsted and New York Times. Of course, New York Times, gold standard of journalism in a way, but especially Schibsted is a media group from Norway. They are doing pretty amazing stuff. And so we summarized our strategy into 4 major goals. First one, turn our users into listeners, is a product question. So it's all about leverage your own reach into audio. And the sales question, I've mentioned that we build up a dedicated audio team, sales team. The third thing, build flagship content. It's the content question, of course, and everybody wants to create great content, but the challenge is to be visible and be too successful. To give you an idea, in Germany, we have over 75,000 German-speaking podcasts, so how to get on the top. And the fourth dimension has to do with all the new business efforts we do, thinking beyond podcasts, creating new products, develop new distribution channels. And I would like to give you a short walkthrough here. So, of course, we want to leverage our reach. I've mentioned that already. And you see that also on a global basis, everybody is consolidating across the value chain. We do it as well, of course, right? This is pretty much obvious. And when it comes to monetization, the truth is 95% of all podcasts worldwide are not monetized yet. No matter, I mean, this is definitely a challenge because 2 billion sounds big, but on a worldwide basis, this is nothing, to be honest. So, I mean, to give you an idea, in Germany, we are talking about 50 million net ad revenue this year, which is nice. Of course, you have these huge growth rates, but on a quite low basis. And this is also the reason, by the way, why we have a lot of discussions that pretty much reminds me at the early days of web TV and YouTube about media currencies, about measurement, about technology. But I assume that this will be gone pretty soon because everybody's waiting for the, let's say, Google AdSense moment of audio, and we are sure that will come pretty soon. So therefore, it's growing, but it's not on that level that it could be. Flagship content, that's our word for great content. Sounds a little bit more fancy. So the good news is, yes, we tenfold our reach since the start of this audio task force back in the days. But I would like to share with you 3 major challenges I have to deal with since we establishing this business unit. The first one, if you are a centralized business unit in a corporate environment and you go to an editorial team, they are, I would say, a little bit skeptical at the beginning. And therefore, it was tremendously helpful that everybody in our team is able to produce a podcast or even is produce a podcast on its own. And if you're talking about people, about stuff that you are doing on your own, compared to if you are talking about stuff you have never done on your own, it's a completely different conversation. And this was extremely helpful. And now we really joined forces here. That was, I think, challenge number 1. Challenge number 2 was to focus, because we have a lot of passion-driven podcasts in the beginning about nice niche topics. But if you want to be market leader, you have to attract a certain let's say, mainstream topics, of course, also. And so therefore, the question was how to focus. And the truth is, we stopped almost half of the podcasts since we are responsible for that business. And not everybody was clapping in its hands, but it was totally necessary to increase the focus on the promising one and to develop new podcasts across the core editorial departments of the brands. And the third challenge was to find the right mixture of own productions and productions to order. And we pretty much use the TV industry approach where we say, okay, everything which is pretty close to the newsroom, where we have topics that are pretty close to our journalists, like news, politics, business, stuff like that. Of course, we produce it on our own with our own internal resources. But as soon as it comes to storytelling, so all these topics that are hard to integrate into your day-to-day work, if you're working in a daily newspaper, we use third parties to support us, including WakeWord, but also others. And for us, a new format is like launching a rocket. At the beginning, it's tremendously time-consuming and expensive if you want to create a successful podcast. So why is that? Because you need to find the right host. You need the right script. You need a communication plan. You need a sound design. You need a pilot episode. You need a lot of work. And then launch date. Everything has to work together. And if you are doing well, you launch it into the orbit. Once you are there, it's easy. You simply have to produce new episodes, new series, but it's really tough to get into the orbit. And we have a translation of that, which is called every format is a startup. And this mindset really makes a difference, because for every format, we have a USP, we have a communication plan, we have a marketing plan for pretty much everything. And this really helps to develop each format. And to give you one example here, on the left-hand side, there's a format which is called Alles auf Aktien, which is a daily stock market report, 15 minutes long. We just have achieved 2 million downloads on a monthly basis last month. And the Pioneer Briefing, I've mentioned that before, that's the #1 daily news stuff. It's way beyond 2 million. So it really pays off if you focus on every format and do all the details. Details really matter here. It's like launching a new publication from a publisher's point of view. And the fourth part is, of course, the distribution thing. Distribution has to be very ubiquitous, that's clear. And we have to deal with the oligopoly of Apple and Spotify in this market. But the challenge is to increase the rest. And therefore, we do a lot of things. We have partnered with TuneIn on an exclusive basis. We have integrated some podcasts into linear radio stations and a couple of other things. We just started to figure out what's going on there with YouTube. And to give you one idea, we just started a project that tries to bring together the best of radio with the best of podcasts. So Stories FM is a web radio that is feeded by 20 of our most successful podcasts, and it has also music in it. And the good thing is that it really, we just started, but the figures are really promising. And our approach here is simply to address new listeners in a well-known manner. Simply push the button and start listening. And finally, we're really looking forward that we have the possibility to launch this analytics tool. It's really breathtaking because, to give you one idea, when it comes to data quality, we're able to forecast the downloads of every single episode in the market, in the German-speaking market. For the time being, Germany, but who knows? And so what's in here? I think if you're doubling down on audio, it's really a journey. It's not something you start this month and you see the results in 3 months' time from now. For us, it was extremely helpful to have this bold goal in order to prioritize all tasks and projects. Every format is a startup. Okay, this is our mantra, and we really see that this makes a difference. And finally, our business is not rocket science. If you build up a team, you need audio lovers, and the rest are details. So talking about rockets, in 1997, the NASA launched a space probe called Voyager 1. And on board was these golden records with a lot of voices, sounds, music from mankind. And It starts with greetings from the Secretary UN General at that time in very bad English, with Austrian accent. And then, of course, once again, Bach. So, what it's all about, it starts with the heartbeat of your mother, and it ends with Bach, and the rest are details. Thank you so much.
Ladies